saying, Dr. Stephanie, you are a certified autism specialist and now diverse marriage therapist. I can't wait to learn about how you're helping people lead better lives. But I'm wondering, there's a personal struggle story behind your intention to start both of your companies. Can you share more about it with us?
Sure. So I graduated back around 2000 with my master's in counseling and set up a practice where I was living then in Charlotte, North Carolina, formerly called Healing Words Christian Counseling, and became licensed in the state of North Carolina in about 2002. So I usually tell people I was kind of minding my own business, living the American dream, starting my business, having children. And then in 2005, my daughter, my oldest daughter, was having a lot of difficulties at school. And I remembered something back in counseling about this thing called Asperger's that I was never supposed to encounter because it was like 1 in 10,000 kids. And my daughter then was diagnosed in 2005, 2006 with Asperger's. And that kind of started my journey in trying to find supports for her and for our family. There were really not many options out there. So as I kind of dug in and learned more about autism, then called Asperger's, it just kind of moved me into a different way of doing mental health and work with families and marriages.
Oh, wow. So your daughter pretty much just changed the path for you.
She did. She totally changed the trajectory of what I was going to be doing. And it started just to help her, like most moms, right? Like I'm willing to do whatever is necessary to help my child, and really looking to therapeutic support. And just while there are very many well-meaning people, there just weren't a lot of people who really understood autism and Asperger's. And so I felt like I had to kind of invent the wheel. I had to kind of figure out my own strategies and figure out what would work. And then just my initial goal was help her become an independent person in society. And I kind of thought, okay, well, we've done that. And she said, you know what, Mom, there's, a lot of people in my community, the autism community, don't really have people who understand. And so she kind of challenged me to stay in the field and to do really more work and change my focus. So I ended up changing really the whole focus to working with families with special needs and challenges.
So how's that been for the past few years?
It's very busy and pretty lonely. So my first company is Autism Spectrum Resources for Marriage and Family, LLC. And that's coaching and counseling, for families, for marriages, maybe helping with advocacy or various things that you need, for your child, the various things that are out there. And then I have wait list all the time. In fact, I have a wait list going into 2024, which is ridiculous. Wow. But part of that is there's just not a lot of people out there who are really trained in being a certified autism specialist. And then specifically for those of us who are in the faith community, our faith is really important. And so to find a certified autism specialist plus find someone who's willing to work within your faith, that really puts me in a very narrow spot. So I started my second company, the International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages. And this is really working with autism in marriages. And we've developed courses and curriculum. And our goal is to train coaches, chaplain, psychiatrists, psychologists, anyone, clinical social workers who is going to be working with the autism population to be better trained and better equipped in what you're already doing. So that's really where we're trying to get more people in the field doing this work.
Exactly. So your wait list can be a little bit less because, wow,
yes,
2024.
I would love to not have a wait list. I would love for people to be able to get the supports that they want right now. But sadly, I am one person and I cannot do it all.
Unfortunately not. And when you talk about, you said Christian and plus also getting the support when they need it. So how did the idea come up to say, okay, I'm going to the Christian part of it and the autism part of it and mix them together to help people with their faith? How did you come up with the idea to mix the two?
Well, that's a great question. Even again, kind of back in our search and trying to help find resources for my oldest daughter, you could kind of find someone who could do Christian counseling and maybe talk about the Christian spiritual stuff, or you could maybe find someone who kind of sort of knew about autism because they went to school and had a graduate degree. But finding someone to really in a company to combine both was really difficult. And then later on in life, my husband would also be identified on the spectrum. And there really wasn't anyone as I was looking around, like if I really wanted help or support or therapeutic support, where would I go? I don't really have a lot of options. So it kind of, I think it was back in about 2010, 2011, I just started thinking about, this new diagnosis that came about in the 1990s called Asperger's or high functioning autism at the time. There's going to be a whole generation of people graduating college, transitioning into the work world, wanting to be in romantic relationships and marriages, and who's going to be ready to work with them when that happens. And I tried knocking on doors to a lot of big Christian organizations and ministries like, hey, we're not ready. Counselors aren't ready. And I was hoping a really big organization would kind of take up that mantle, but no one was doing it. A lot of people said, oh, people with autism, they don't want to get married. They just want to isolate.
Really?
This isn't really a big deal. You're kind of making a big deal out of nothing. But we know that children now are identified at 1 in 54 kids. And we also know now it's a hereditary thing, 80% hereditary. So there's an 80% chance one parent could be on the spectrum. So we could say about 1 in 50 or so couples could be a neurodiverse couple. And yet many people who work in marriage therapy really are not trained and equipped to work with neurodiverse couples.
Wow. And I don't understand why people will think that just because you have autism, so you don't want to get married. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to have a family?
Well, that's kind of one of the myths and the stereotypes that comes with autism. Some people believe that, because, there's kind of the stereotype that maybe a young adult on the autism spectrum is living with their parents in the basement, playing video games. People with autism just aren't interested in interacting. People with autism don't want to get married. And that's part of the problem. There's that stigma, even in the clinical culture, that, this just really isn't a big issue. But really, many people are on the spectrum that are married, and especially if they were Asperger's or high functioning autism, or now it's called autism level 1. Many of those individuals are married and have jobs in corporate America. And but there are some issues. There are some communication issues, some social relational issues that they really need some therapeutic support. But then sometimes the therapist they go see will say, oh, well, you can't have autism because you have a job. Well, you can't have autism because you're married and you have children.
Really?
So yeah, that's kind of part of the stigma that we're really wanting to change, to get therapists and clinicians to really understand that people on the spectrum do get married, they do have children, and you need to do therapy differently if you're going to work with a couple where one spouse is on the spectrum.
And I mean, some of them, they are super smart. I don't know why people would think like that about them. Super smart. It's like, whoa, you're a smart kid.
Yeah, many are. And so another thing that I like to remind clinicians is some people have like a very kind of old-fashioned view of autism where they mix autism plus intellectual capability. So, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, when, if a child had any difference like Downs or autism, they usually would separate the child from the parents and institutionalize, that person. And so a lot of that would be with like, if there was like a mental challenge, we used to use the word mentally retarded. We don't use that word anymore. Now we say mentally impaired. So if that was the problem, if that was an issue, if someone is mentally challenged, that's, certainly different than autism in and of itself. So autism, a person can be maybe more mentally challenged, but they also can be quite exceptional in the genius range. And so that's another thing that I really want clinicians to understand is separate IQ from autism, because they're two different things. And then maybe work past some of the stigmas and the myths that you've believed about the autism spectrum.
Exactly. I agree with you on that. So now with the Spectrum Resources for Marriage and Family LLC, so what are the services that company offers?
So right now, that's the one that has the really high wait list. I kind of do a couple of things. Sometimes someone might want to consult. They maybe have a child newly diagnosed on the spectrum. And so kind of where do we get started? We feel overwhelmed. What should the school be doing? And so since I've had a lot of work in the advocacy field for 504s and IEPs, I might be doing some consulting just to kind of get the person kind of started. Sometimes marriages, when you have a child on the spectrum, there can be a lot of challenges, a lot of things, a lot of protocols, a lot of services that the child needs. And the parents can sometimes disagree on how much they would like to spend or support this child. So there might be some marital challenges and complications. So that might be a little bit different when you're doing marriage work. And then more than likely, one of the parents are on the spectrum. And so we call that a neurodiverse couple. And so I might be doing marriage counseling a little bit differently based on that couple having mixed neurology, as we would say. So the Autism Spectrum Resources really kind of focuses around marriage and family, again, from consulting and mentoring to maybe actual marriage work.
So it's pretty much just focusing on the, you will say the husband and the wife, but not actually 100% the kid. So you don't really meet the kid, you just meet with the husband and the wife.
So sometimes things got a little complicated with Zoom. So I have kind of a third business, so to speak, where I do have an office. And so I'll work with kids between the ages of 13 and 18. I really want the person to be able to kind of have a conversation and be able to do some kind of talk therapy. But sometimes, people on the spectrum do struggle with additional or other mental health issues, because autism is not a mental health issue, but they may struggle with social anxiety or depression. And so in my office setting, I might have some people come in and work with kids that way. But I've really kind of moved into kind of working more with the parents, because sometimes if parents don't know the services that their child needs, or sadly, sometimes in the faith-based community, they feel they can simply pray it away, or some actually still believe if people have a disability or a difference, that that's like a curse or God is mad at you. So sometimes you kind of have to start with the parents and work through some things that they may not be believing correctly about the autism, and then kind of getting them on the same page so that they can better serve their child.
Wow. Now, when you say that I have another business, a third business, so now I'm curious to know, where do you find time?
That is the question of the day. Really, so what I'm really wanting to do, my hope is to be able to train up so many people who are coaches, social workers, pastoral counselors, chaplains, anybody who's doing people work, to train up enough people that I could move more into more training and more curriculum. I have hours and hours of curriculum that I've already recorded, but I don't have the time to get edited and put together. So things are going to have to change in 2023 for Dr. Holmes, or I'm not going to be able to get it all done. But that's part of my kind of heart cry today, is really that more professionals would take this seriously to become trained, so that I could really move into having one business at one point in time, which would be to educate couples and to educate to other professionals. My doctorate went back to school as education and more in organizational development and leadership. So I would really love to move in that direction. But right now, there's just too many people in need who need help, couples are in need, and there's just not enough people in this space to allow me to transition out.
Right. So, but also with the International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages. So with that company, let's say if I wanted to, I'm a professional and I wanted to be a part of that, do I need to be a Christian?
No. So while we don't compromise on what we believe in our faith, anybody could sign up and kind of take one of our courses. So we do have one module up. We call it Educate. And so that would be kind of your basics into autism, breaking myths of autism and stereotypes of autism, problems people have in identifying autism. Sometimes some clinicians just aren't really trained in differential diagnoses. And so we do talk about neurodiverse couples from specifically helping those who are neurodiverse and faith-based, because sometimes there are some teachings in Christianity that are very confusing about male headship, and some of that can be taken into the wrong meanings. So we do want you to kind of understand a little bit about the Christian culture so you can better work with those who are faith-based and neurodiverse. But we've also interviewed couples who have, gotten help, and they want to kind of share help and hope with other people. And we've, interviewed some people who've sadly been through divorce to talk about what led to the divorce. And so that is available already as one of our courses. As we get more time, we would love to add more courses. But if you are a clinician and you're really wanting to know more, we have a free service that we offer as well. We started a podcast in August of 2021. I think we have 67 podcasts up right now, and that is free with no subscription at all. And we interview the thought leaders throughout the world who are doing this work on our podcast. And we're about to hit 50,000 downloads, and so I'm so excited about that. But that's a way that we want to serve the community, whether or not you buy our services or not. We really care about the community, and we really want people to be better educated about neurodiverse couples.
So not only they don't really need to be a Christian, but they just have to have an understanding of how to help people that are Christian.
Christianity is a culture, so every culture has kind of different rules in it and understandings and guidelines. So if you're going to work with a couple of faith, you should really know a little bit more about the culture that they're from.
Exactly. So is there some sort of, when you say for the class, there's some sort of certificate they get after that, or do they can work with you after they take that class? How does the process work?
You're right. That's exactly what we're wanting to do. So the International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriage, we are building a certification program so that when you continue Module 1 and the 2 interview sets that we've done, you would be considered kind of autism aware. So you could say you are trained and you did the courses through us and you are now autism aware. As we build more curriculum into that, you would work towards some supervised and mentored hours with us, where then after you do that, we could coach you and mentor you. If you have a specific client or a case that you're working with and you need some additional help, then you could kind of get a coaching certification. So that is definitely the area that we would love to take our work.
Is that something you will be adding on in 2023? Hopefully?
Yes. Our goal is to get this second module up, which has been mostly filmed. It needs 1 or 2 modules left to it, and then we'll be adding the next module up. Our really big goal is my husband and I, who run International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages together, we are going to be embarking on actual academic research for 2023. Part of the issue is how it works in the professional academic world is unless there's a study that says something is an issue, then people don't tend to buy in and believe it. And there's maybe a handful of studies that have been done on marriages where one partner is on the spectrum. So we want to contribute to that research knowledge and then maybe write a book. And then part of the issue is we think that most professionals don't understand that they need more training. So we want to contribute to the research that we can do a qualitative study on our couples and couples throughout the world who are willing to work to be part of this research to help get that understanding out there, to hear from couples themselves that many times they've gone to clinicians who are not autism trained and it's caused harm. It has really hurt the marriage or really hurt one of the partners in the marriage. Most people, when they come to me, I am marriage therapist 5, 6, or 7. And so it's devastating, to have a people helper that you're really wanting advice from say things to you that are harmful to you. So until there's some research out there that says, hey, you need some more training, that might be part of the problem that we're trying to solve.
So for the books itself, will it be like when you say that you're gonna have clients, right? Patient people you're gonna be seeing, that's gonna be like the research going to be a part of the book. Are you gonna be doing those research for free? And then so meaning like let's say for example you see a client for that research, do the client have to pay you for that? Is that going to be like a free session?
Okay, so that's a great question. So when I was doing my dissertation, I was doing qualitative research, and the specific type that I used was called phenomenological. So what you do is I sent out a survey, and so many people could get into the survey. So that'll be the level 1 of our research. We'll send out a survey through social media marketing. I'll contact other therapists because we really want people all around the world to be able to participate in the research. From that point, when you're doing qualitative research, you might pick 10 or 15 couples to set up an interview with so that you get more data beyond what your survey was. And so for that, it wouldn't quite be like a session. It would be some like a structured interview, because we'd be wanting to compare answers from all the couples on the same types of questions. So for all of that, so that would be, of course, no charge to any individual that was participating in the study. And then if we do get a book written out of it, we would give them a book as a thank you gift.
Yeah.
But part of research is you want non-paid individuals, so that people know that you didn't pay for your data, you didn't pay for the results. People enter in as a volunteer because they want to contribute to a body of knowledge.
I don't know why, but you keep amazing me every time you keep talking, and I get more amazing. You are just awesome. So,
well, thank you.
You believe that the church house and schools should be the most inclusive places for people with differences and disabilities. How do you facilitate the same?
So yes, if kind of thinking for children, especially, where are they spending most of their day? They're doing that at school. And then for those of faith, the next place that they're going to be a lot is at their church or their place of worship. So I always say I want the church house and the schoolhouse to be the most inclusive. Now, schools are supposed to be inclusive. According to some laws that were put into place into the 1970s, schools should be more inclusive. Now, if you talk about that children used to be institutionalized and not allowed to come to public school, well, we do have children with a lot of disabilities and differences now in school, but still a lot of schools try to segregate them. The Brown versus the Board of Education case, while we think of that as being really important for people of color, that is also a huge case for people with disabilities, because once we started working with children with disabilities in school, they wanted to segregate them. Well, that case said segregation is not good. Segregation means no segregation for any reason. So as there's put those laws into place into the 70s and 80s, where some schools still struggle with how to best include a person with a disability or a difference into the mainstream classroom while providing them with the services and supports that they need. And that was a really big part of my dissertation, is that many people are still being abused at school. They're still being excluded. They're being bullied. And again, educators of a certain age aren't really that educated on autism and Asperger's and what became high functioning autism. So that's still a work in progress. And I have contributed some peer reviewed articles on that. And then the church house, while the church in general was very institutional in getting the ADA laws, sadly, most churches are not ADA approved.
Really?
Because they are exempt, separation of church and state, many churches don't have, basic things like wheelchair ramps, or if you have a child with a disability or autism, can you really minister to that child in your children's ministry? Do you have a place for that child? What if the child is 13 but functions like a 5-year-old? How do you minister to that child in your church? And so sadly, one of the most unreached people groups in the United States are families of people with disabilities, because only 11% of evangelical churches are equipped to handle people with disabilities and differences. So there's a lot of work there. And I think for those of us who are Christian, I think Jesus would be very disappointed that there are still many people who are being excluded and can't get into the church house, when if you know Jesus's ministry, he spent a lot of time with those who are disabled and marginalized. And so we could do better in the church at reaching people who are marginalized.
Wow. So what do you think that schools can do to actually, because I believe that because I met some children that's different, but you wouldn't know they are. So not only they can go to a public school as normal kids because they're fine. They act normal. They do things normal. They're smart. Super smart. I know one of them of my friends, this kid, she was 3 years old and she can write her name. And I was like, you are so smart. But she was diagnosed with autism. So what do you think public school can do to actually allow these kids that are so smart, brilliant, to actually be a part of like a public school without have to be at home schooling or anything like that?
Well, according to the law, which is called the IDEA laws, people who are diagnosed or have an IEP or 504 are not supposed to just get or just their academic supports. They're supposed to be socially included as well. And so that's the biggest issue that I see in a lot of public schools is if a child is diagnosed and they have what we call a 504 or an IEP, they may be getting some basic supports if they need them academically, but they're really failing, in my opinion, on really offering social supports, social integration, teaching social skills, also teaching children who are neurotypical or someone without a difference how to get along and be a friend with people who are different. I think that's lacking in society as a whole, but school is really our place. We could teach kids who are neurotypical and kids who are neurodiverse to kind of appreciate each other for their differences. And I see that's a huge issue because you've said it before that, some of these children are very smart and they may not need academic support. But that's why autism, ADHD, learning challenges, we call those the hidden disabilities, because just by looking at someone, you would really never know. Unless you really talk with the parents or really get to know the child, you're not really seeing the other supports that they need. And that's really, really important. That's missing in so many schools of social acceptance and social inclusion.
Is that something you are willing to fight for?
That is something I've really been trying to fight for. When I did my dissertation and did some of the peer-reviewed articles, again, you've kind of like, my degree set is really weird. So it's not often someone has a psychology degree, a counseling degree, an education degree, a mediation and negotiation degree, and seminary all put together. So what I have found through my career is if you want a seat at the table, you have to have the degree to get there. So when I went back to school to get my doctorate, it probably would have made more sense if I would have gotten a PhD in psychology or clinical psych, as many of my colleagues do. But I got the education degree because if you really want to talk to educators, principals,
yes,
administrators, and teachers, they have to know that you have the education degree. So I really kind of put a lot of my research time in that, talking to individuals on the spectrum about their experience in school and parents who have had some pretty bad experiences in school.
Oh.
And so really someone else said it, why can't we all get along? That's really what my dissertation came to, is collaboration is key. It's going to take the school and the parent really working together on the same team versus sometimes the schools are trying to do the very least that they can get away with according to the law, instead of what is the actual best for this child to help them reach potential. And that's another problem with the public school system, is it's failure-based. Often until a child has failed or is really struggling, will they get involved and really help. So if you're kind of just a little bit struggling, but you're still pulling some A, B's, and C's, well, you're not failing bad enough for us to really intervene and help you. So I disagree that it's a failure-based system to let someone get all to that point that they may be failing a grade or maybe being kicked out of school or needing alternate school before they're going to step in and help with some kind of support.
I don't know. If you're getting C's, there's a problem there.
Well, yes, you would think, especially when someone has an IQ that could get them A's and B's, but something else is happening, maybe social anxiety or depression, or they're being bullied at school.
Yes.
When you're being bullied, that is terrible for your mental health. So how can you really focus on your studies if you're being bullied or if you're being excluded? That is going to take its toll on what you're able to absorb academically.
Yes, and I think that by 2022, the government will have that bully thing all over with. But I'm still surprised to know it's still in school. It's still going on now, which is...
Oh, yeah. Sadly, it usually takes the education system about 20 to 30 years after something like Asperger's, or what used to be called high-functioning autism, when that entered our lexicon in the 90s. And all these laws were kind of put in place in the 70s and 80s and updated in the 90s. I think it had another update in like 2005, 2006. You still just have some teachers that I have interviewed that said, I don't want an autistic kid in my classroom. I am a mainstream teacher. I did not get special ed on purpose. I shouldn't have to work with kids I don't want to work with. And so there's a lot of that attitude still in school, which I was amazed when I was doing my dissertation. There are very few schools with programs and curriculums that are really training mainstream teachers on how to incorporate kids with needs into their class, when supposedly that's what the law says we're supposed to be doing, is mainstreaming and including, yet still really most of the training is for those who are special education teachers. They're really not equipping and training mainstream teachers. So some of that is not their fault. They're not getting equipped and trained on how to better serve kids in their class. And of course, a shout out for the teachers. I understand you've got overcrowded classrooms. You have very little support and you're working way more than you should. So I am not down on teachers. I am for teachers, but I am also for there needing to be more education and equipping and curriculums that better train our teachers so that when they are in the mainstream, they can better include those kids with differences.
And I think that it's the time, Dr. Holmes, to actually go into the school system and start helping the teachers.
I agree, because COVID made it so much worse. A lot of kids who have disabilities, all of our kids suffered from not being able to go to school, but a lot of kids who had 504s and IEPs were not getting served during the 2 years of this pandemic. And so they regressed and lost a lot of skills. So it's like, I feel for the teachers who are having to there were some skills gained in a lot of the population, but now these 2 years of going to Zoom and now getting kids back into the classroom, it's a tough situation for all families, but it's especially difficult for families that have a disability or a learning difference with their children.
So now let's talk a little bit about your work to bring restoration and spiritual renewal to troubled lives, right? Tell us more about the work that you are doing in that area.
So for me, I'm also a reverend, and since I do work a lot I'll work with anyone, but most of my clientele are Christian or faith-based. And so we believe in Christian culture, of course, that you're more than just your physical body. You have a mind, you think, you have emotions, and you have a spirit or a soul. And so if you kind of think of things holistically, when things are not okay in your marriage, or things are not okay with your child, or things are not okay with your job, it doesn't just affect you in one area. When something is not okay, it affects you mentally, it affects you emotionally, it affects you spiritually. And so for us, that as we work with the Christian culture, we want to make sure that our counseling and the procedures and protocols that we're doing, are in alignment with someone's faith, but also addressing that. I know for me, my own story, when my daughter was diagnosed, I really got angry with God. I really kind of blamed him for the situation. I isolated a little bit from my church. There just weren't many people who understood what I was going through, and I would get all this terrible advice, like, I'm being punished by God, for having a child on the spectrum, or God has chosen you to have this child because you're going to grow so much spiritually. There's just a lot of bad advice, and how they saw her, how they saw me as a parent. So that led, for me, there was a couple of years I was a very angry, bitter person. And so spiritually and mentally and emotionally, that took its toll on me. And so there wasn't too many people really reaching out to that piece of me to help. I had a pastor in my life who was wonderful at that time, who really just kind of let me be and let me feel and let me kind of walk through that. And he kind of brought me back online spiritually, so to speak, so that I could get back to doing my work. But he really said, Stephanie, these are some things you're going to have to address. You're going to have to really get to the bottom of this. And so it did a lot of work on suffering and a lot of work on, when things you pray for don't happen, and what do you do when things you're praying for don't happen, or you asked for something and you got something else. How does that affect your relationship with God? Do you change who you think God is, or have you changed as a person? And I think that happens a lot for couples and families that I'm working with when there's some sort of identification or diagnosis. Where's God? Why did he let this happen? And so that becomes a big piece of their spiritual work we're going to have to do as well.
I think that God gave us give us the thing that we can handle. He will never give you something he feels that you're not going to be able to handle it yourself. And sometimes, like you said, even for me, if I pray, I ask for this, and then I get the other thing. It's like, well, that's not what I asked for. But usually what I do, I appreciate what I have and then use it, because God gives me this is because he knows that I need it. And you know what? Usually I do. I didn't realize it at the time I get it, but it was handy when I needed it. So anyway, I see where you're going with your point. So it's sometimes we can get angry without thinking about it.
Because things don't work out. You know, we have kind of the American dream, right? You get married and you own a home and you have 2.3 kids and 2 dogs, and, you know, life is supposed to be good and it's supposed to work out. And if I pray enough or tithe enough or go to church enough, things should look a certain way. But Jesus told us before he left, in this world, you will have trouble. But I give you my peace, that where you are, that where I am, you can also be. So his promise is not that we're going to not have suffering. His promise is not that we may prosper on this earth. He promised we're going to have some pain, but he promises to be with us and guide us and walk through us, equip us and grow us. That's the promise, not to avoid pain and suffering.
But I think that we are here. We're supposed to go through all these challenges anyway. We're supposed to. Right. Because our faith, I feel like our faith will always be challenged. So how much do you believe? And are you going to keep believing even if this happened to you?
Right.
So I think that's the whole thing that's happening to all of us in this earth. And it's just we have to keep on believing. And I never really meet anyone that's do the things that you do. It's kind of like Christianity and mix it with helping families. I don't usually see it like that. It's unique, I have to say. But I see why you chose that. And then I think that what you are doing is helping a lot of families. And I just hope that more people will come take your courses so that in 2024, you don't have a waiting list for 2020, 30.
Exactly. That's the goal. They're actually pinned up on my wall right here. And I see them and I pray for them. And I was like, God, bring somebody to these people that they're not waiting on me. So that's certainly my hope and goal is I don't see myself as the person that has to help you. But if I can train someone else and help in that field, it's more about many of us doing the work, not just Dr. Stephanie Holmes. I'm nothing special and great in and of myself, but I do have a lot of gifts and a lot of knowledge that I could share to train other people. And I have a couple of people that I have mentored, and, you know, they would say to you, because I'll have someone on the wait list, and I was like, well, I know these 2 other ladies who are building their businesses and practices, and they've just reached out and said, we're about full. We're about can't take any more people on.
Wow.
So it's a great place if you're in private practice and you want to get more clients. If you had more training, there are some of us who could help give you some people to get started in your practice.
Yes, I think so too. And any advice for those who want to get into something unique like you are doing to help families who are in special conditions?
Yes, so I think, first of all, of course, whatever you're going to do, if you're going to do coaching or counseling, you know, you have to have that degree or that certification first. And then learning more about autism, part of it, I mean, some of it is academic, like taking our courses, but really you need to spend time with a lot of different people on the autism spectrum, because Dr. Stephen Shore says when you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So you really need to see the different ways that autism manifests in women and men. You need to understand what that looks like when someone has different sensory issues and maybe when someone has less sensory issues. And really spending time reading and hearing from other people on the spectrum would be a great way to kind of build your understanding of a clientele that you want to work with.
But also, do you think that, let's say, psychologists, can they also something that they can also take your course to actually be able to provide their services to families with autism?
Yes, because sometimes in what I have been finding when I send some of my individuals for a full evaluation, it's my belief that if you are a clinical psychologist and you are testing or assessing someone for autism and you are not willing to take in data or advice from those who are living with that person, then you really don't understand what autism is. Part of autism is some social and self-awareness issues. So if you're interviewing somebody and they're not very self-aware or not understanding their impact on the people in their home, and you're only going to use that data for your evaluation, you might come to the wrong conclusion. So many psychologists will not use a spouse or significant other's information. I currently do assessments, but I'm about ready to stop doing assessments.
Aww.
But the assessment that I would use does call for a spouse's participation in it. And so I think clinical psychologists, if you're listening to this, if you're going to really do assessment of somebody on the spectrum, you need to be getting more data, more than just their self-report.
Wow. So when you say that you're going to stop doing it, are you stopping it now or are you stopping it in 2023?
I literally have 2 assessment booklets left. So when I finish those 2 assessment booklets, I am not going to do it anymore. And that's because an assessment can take 5 to 6 hours. And so, when you're running essentially 3 businesses and then you want to start doing some research, you have to say no to something to say yes to something else. So that is one of the things that I'm going to have to say no to in the future, is doing further assessments. My heart and my goal was to do them far cheaper than clinical psychologists do them, but I just simply don't have 5 and 6 hours. That's 5 or 6 hours I can't work with couples in marriage work. So it's sadly going to have to go. So clinicians out there, I'm hoping you'll get some better training on doing some adult autism assessments.
So now, how can, let's say someone would like to get help from you, how can they do that? How can they reach out to you for help?
Well, you can contact me through my website, but sadly you will get an auto reply that says my clientele is currently booked up. And so what I suggest couples do is we made some courses at ChristianNeuroDiverseMarriages.com. You can click on for couples. And so I have put some courses together like ASNT, Struggling to Connect, the basics of autism. And I can get you about 5 or 6 hours of information that you would have gotten in counseling, but you can do it at your own pace. We've also interviewed other couples who kind of give advice on kind of what helped them. And so you can kind of access that. And then our weekly podcast, which there's always a new one every Monday, you can download and pick a topic, whether you want to learn more about communication or sexuality or intimacy or theory of mind or mind blindness. You can pick that up and you can get some help and information and some practical tips that way. But until we have more clinicians trained, specifically in the culture, if you are not wanting someone who is faith-based trained, there is another organization that's doing great work called aane.org, and they work with all types of couples, cohabitating to various types of couples, but they don't address faith issues. So if you're wanting to really be trained in autism and faith issues, then we invite you to take our courses, which are available on our site.
All I can say is that I hope that more people come and get trained by you so that you can help more people, because I think that faith is important and that people should get the help that where they feel like someone care about the faith, about what they believe, about the things that they truly admit in this world. And for me, it's important. So I would want the same for anybody else. So as an entrepreneur yourself, what advice would you give to women who want to start their own business?
Starting your own business. I think, for many of us as women, it comes from something in our own need, something that we see is missing. And I know many of the women that are kind of doing some work in the autism fields, whether they're advocates or making workshops or whatever, it usually came from a personal experience. So there are probably many moms out there. You have really created some successful strategies with your child, and maybe that's something you can turn into a coaching business. If you also had coaching certification and learned a little bit about a business approach, you can take some of the things that you have learned and applied and coach and help other moms. Some people might want to do that for a business that's paid, and some might just find that fulfilling, as a volunteer. Because you know what, I've been through this and I want to help somebody else who's gone through it. So I think there's opportunity there. And then there might be, counselors and coaches and social workers out there that you're already in practice and you're thinking, you know what, I'd like to maybe do something different or grow in an area like NeuroDiverse Couples. You're welcome. I see no one as a competitor, only as an ally. So I would just welcome more people that if you are in the coaching and counseling field and you want to kind of shift your focus a little bit, and because maybe someone in your family or that you know and love is on the spectrum and you really want to help, there's so much need and you would probably be amazing because you have your clinical skills and some personal knowledge that with a little bit of training, you could go into a coaching or counseling practice.
Exactly. And all they have to do is take your course. How hard can that be?
Just take my course, please.
Just take the course. That's all you need.
I have 24 years of lived experience plus 3 degrees to offer you help.
Exactly. So they are in good hands. Just take the course and then start helping people. We need more help. Anything else you'd like to share with us before I let you go today?
I just thank you for this time to kind of talk about my heart and passion. As I kind of started my work before we started the International NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages, my heart is because I'm the mom of a 24-year-old on the spectrum, and I want for anybody on the spectrum to have what she has. She does live independently and lives halfway across the country living on her own. And I know that's not everyone's story. Not everyone on the spectrum will be able to live independently. But my heart's desire is that anyone who is on the spectrum or has a learning difference or a disability, that you can be as independent as you possibly can, whatever that means for you, and whatever potential that you have, that those around you would help you find it, and you would be able to operate in your gifts, no matter how small or how great. And then if you're married and you're in a neurodiverse relationship, you don't have to be just barely surviving. You can learn skills and you can have a fulfilling marriage, even though it might be challenging and complex. You can change your marriage into a happier and more healthy marriage if you would learn the skills. And so that's kind of the heart cry that I have, that I hope comes through our time together today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holmes. I appreciate the time, the knowledge, and helping people. And we need more women to step up and help, because at the end of the day, I felt like God gave us we have that special difference between men, is the fact that we can feel the issues, we can see them, and we can fix them. And also sometimes we take our angriness and we switch it to something a lot more beautiful than that. Instead of going out there and hurt people with it, but we take it, we turn it to something beautiful to help others. And I think that's what you are doing is awesome. And I'm grateful that you didn't let your angry took you down, but instead you turn it to something beautiful. And
it almost did. And so I keep this beside my desk because joy is a choice. And that's really what changed my trajectory, is that I could choose joy. And so that's your choice too. You can choose joy, and it can be well with your soul, even when your life is difficult and challenging.